So is MMP still working or is it undemocratic? Well, John Michael Swanix reports.
Since the election, there's been a lot of debate about whether we've got our voting system right.
Not only has Winston decided who the government would be, but now he's going to be the Prime Minister for an undefined period of time, and it really highlights a very, very big flaw in the political system that we're currently operating under.
Anti-MMP campaigners have been pushing to get rid of the voting system since it was introduced in 1996.
Reject MMP.
Former Prime Minister John Key was among them. He held a referendum on the issue in 2011. The result? More Kiwis back MMP now than they did when it was introduced.
It actually is delivering for us because we are getting a much more representational democracy in terms of the parties, but also in terms of the types of people are making it through, which is what you hope from proportional representation.
However, even staunch MMP supporters agree there are ways it can be improved. This election saw the majority of voters swing toward the major parties, putting all the minor parties in danger. New Zealand First and the Greens just managed to clear the 5% threshold to enter Parliament. The ACT Party only got 0.5% of the vote, but managed to hang on because leader David Seymour won the Auckland seat of Epsom thanks to a deal with the Nats.
So we've settled at around 5 political parties in our Parliament, which is relatively few in the history of MMP. But for people like me that study this is sort of around about where we thought it might eventually settle out.
It's nearly impossible for new parties to enter Parliament due to the 5% threshold. In fact, not a single party has ever made it to Parliament that wasn't led by a breakaway MP. New Zealand First was created by former National MP Winston Peters. The Māori Party, United Future and ACT all stemmed from Labour Party defectors. The Greens were originally part of the Alliance Party, which was led by former Labour MP Jim Anderton. The Electoral Commission looked into the issues with MMP in 2012. It recommended the threshold be lowered to 4% and the coattail rule, which encourages deal-making for the likes of ACT, be abolished. The Commission toyed with the idea of dropping the threshold to 3% or removing it altogether, but decided against it.
We bring in thresholds because there are reasons to think that we shouldn't have, say, 100 political parties in Parliament, that it might give rise to extremist political parties, or it might hamstring the ability of parties to form government or for Parliament to do its job effectively.
Labour and the Greens backed lowering the threshold to 4% in 2012, but New Zealand First did not. However, all three parties wanted to get rid of the coattail rule. The then national government didn't agree with either proposal, as its support partners, ACT, United Future and the Māori Party, had the potential to benefit from the existing rules. On the face of it, a majority of the Parliament now want to abolish coattailing. However, National's continued opposition means change is very unlikely.
There's a long-standing expectation in New Zealand politics, and it's not an out-and-out rule because we've seen it broken a few times, but there is an expectation that any reasonable significant change to electoral law will be either unanimous or near unanimous.
So what about other solutions? Well, a fairly simple one is to allow voters to rank their preferred parties and candidates. This is called a transferable vote system and is mainly used in New Zealand for health board elections. The positives of this system is that the majority of votes end up counting, because if a voter's first choice doesn't make it into Parliament, their vote gets given to their second choice, and so on. This would help address issues like tactical voting, where people will vote for their second choice party or candidate out of fear their first choice won't receive enough support to clear the threshold or win an electorate seat.
People want to get bang for their buck, you know? They don't want to cast a wasted vote or give a vote to an unelected minority. They'd rather choose their second best choice and have it count for something.
How much of a barrier do you think the idea of a wasted vote is to voters in New Zealand?
It's hard to quantify, but it is certainly an effect that we observe. People will make different electoral choices based on their perception of whether or not their vote is likely to be wasted.
This election, the largest proportion of wasted votes went to the Opportunities Party. It secured 2.4% of the vote, well short of the 5% threshold, so didn't make it into Parliament.
There would have been people that probably preferred to vote for the Opportunities Party, that it matched their beliefs closely, but felt that considering the Labour and National competition or the decline in support for the Green Party, for example, that their vote would be better spent elsewhere.
While listing parties and candidates in a preferred order may seem like a simple solution, there are fears it could suppress voting by those with poor literacy and numeracy.
So you'd look at some of the migrant populations, some of the Pacific Island populations where, it's actually really difficult to get them to the polls anyway. And if you make it harder to vote, then they'll go, I don't want to make a mistake.
So if we had a transferable type system layered with the MMP party list proportional system, it would make it one of the more complex electoral systems in the world.
So yes, our democracy isn't perfect, and it's pretty hard to change things, but to be fair, we actually have it pretty good. Kiwi voters are much better represented now than they ever were in the past. Prior to 1996, New Zealand used a first-past-the-post electoral system, where MPs had to win electorate seats to enter Parliament. While this gave more decisive results, it also came with its problems. In 1978 and 1981, for example, Labour actually received more votes than National throughout the country. However, because National won more electorate seats, it got to form the government. It was even worse for minor parties, who would sometimes command more than 20% of the vote nationwide, but only win 1 or 2 seats. These problems worsened in the 1990s. In the last election under first-past-the-post, National was governing on its own with the support of just 1 in 3 voters. Even prominent anti-MMP campaigners like Ashley Church don't want things to go back to the way they were.
I'm a fan of proportionality, just not this particular system. There were better systems put forward in '93 and we missed an opportunity.
However, Victoria Woodman says MMP is only starting to mature. What would you say to someone who's concerned or upset that Winston Peters is about to take over the reins?
Just because they don't like Winston Peters becoming the acting Prime Minister, it doesn't mean that MMP should just be thrown out because of that. There are small things that we can do in other areas that I think would seek to satisfy far more people's preferences around improving the system.
Listing parties and candidates, lowering the threshold and removing coattailing are just some of these solutions. However, changes to electoral law often require a big groundswell of voter support, and MMP has only been around for 22 years. So maybe like most adolescents, it just needs more time to sort out its issues.